I knew I was done the moment the CEO used the word vision like it was a grenade he couldn't wait to lob at my face. We were 5 minutes into the final milestone review for Project Helix, the thing I'd poured 18 months of my life into. I'm talking working through strep throat, reviewing code during my uncle's funeral, and one truly sad Thanksgiving dinner with just me, some lukewarm stuffing, and a laptop running 300 lines of logistics simulations. Helix wasn't just a project. It was my name stitched into the company's future, and I was finally about to present the last performance metrics to the board. Then he walked in. Jake, all teeth and $600 loafers, the kind of guy who calls himself a serial disruptor and thinks you can solve supply chain fragility by vibing harder. He strutted in like he'd just left a magazine shoot about leadership for the future, and the CEO clapped him on the back like they were frat brothers at an alumni mixer. No introduction, no briefing, no warning, just a hand gesture and a line that would cement itself in my memory like a splinter in the brain. Team, let's give leadership a face with vision. He said that while I was mid-sentence, mid-slide, mid-proof. I looked at the screen, looked at the room, and then I looked at Jake, who was already moving toward the front like a golden retriever who found a mic. Now, you may be thinking, damn, Megan, what you do? I'll tell you exactly what I did. I smiled. That's it. Not because I was okay with it. Not because I'm some serene Zen monk who journals her feelings. I smiled because when a man with a fragile ego tries to steal your work and your spotlight, nothing terrifies him more than not knowing what you're thinking. Also, quick pause here. If you've made it this far, do me one favor. Tap that subscribe button and hit like. Most people forget, and yeah, I know it's just a click, but it really helps the team keep making these stories. Okay, back to the fire. So Jake starts spewing buzzwords like he's trying to win a corporate bingo game. Synergies, frictionless scaling, data-conscious frameworks, a bunch of salad tossing that made exactly zero sense to anyone who's actually debugged code or written a compliance memo at 2 a.m. I sat there silent, watching the CEO nod like a bobblehead on cocaine, while the board members looked confused but too polite to say anything. I caught Linda from legal giving me a side glance that said, "Girl, is this a joke?" But we both knew the punchline had already been delivered. Meeting ended with polite applause and a slide Jake didn't understand but presented anyway, something about optimizing freight routes using neural networks he couldn't spell. The CEO declared it a paradigm shift and told everyone we were in good hands. Mine, apparently, were no longer needed. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't flip a chair or key his Tesla. I waited until they filtered out with their free coffees and performative smiles. Waited until even Jake left the clicker on the table like a used napkin, and then I quietly shut my laptop, reached into my tote, and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in months. It was plain black, battered around the corners, and labeled in faded Sharpie, retention clauses and independent ownership rights. I slid it into my bag like I was packing a grenade. Then I stood, adjusted my blazer, and walked past Jake's untouched La Croix on the table. That was the moment I stopped working for Signer Jen and started building the fire that would burn down the fantasy they thought they owned. They wanted vision? I had already filed it. The next morning, I opened my inbox to find an email from HR titled, in all caps, Exciting Role Alignment Update, which, if you've worked more than 5 minutes in corporate America, you already know means you're about to get screwed with a decorative bow on top. Message was laced with exclamation marks like they thought enthusiasm could replace dignity. I'd officially been promoted, and by promoted, I mean quietly shoved sideways into a glorified tech babysitter role. My new title? Senior Systems Consultant. Translation: sit in the corner, hand Jake the keys to the kingdom, and smile while doing it. 5 minutes later, my manager, who once forgot my name during a team lunch, called to walk me through the transition. His voice had that chipper HR script energy that makes you want to dig your own grave with a salad fork. "You'll be reporting to Jake now," he said like he was gifting me a puppy and not feeding me to a lion. "He's super excited to learn from you. We know you'll get him up to speed. You're such a team player, team player." If I had a nickel for every time a man said that right before tossing me under a bus, I'd own the parking lot. So I nodded, thanked him for the opportunity, and hung up. Then I walked straight to my car, parked 2 blocks from the office, sat in the driver's seat with a cold bagel, and screamed into the steering wheel like I was trying to kill it with sound waves. I didn't go back in right away. I sat there for 30 minutes with the AC on low, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look broken. That surprised me. I looked like someone waiting to be underestimated a few more times before lighting a match. Back at my desk, Jake swung by with his perfectly mussed hair and a smug little "let's partner up" energy. He asked for everything: code base access, dev notes, licensing paperwork, my data pipeline cheat sheets. "Anything that'll help me own this deliverable," he said. "Own, not co-lead, not collaborate. Just own." I smiled and said, "Of course." Then I started forwarding him what he asked for, but with just enough polish to keep it legal and just enough gaps to make sure he'd crash and burn. No raw source code. No access to live systems. Just glossy PDFs and half-baked summaries pulled from an old onboarding deck. If he wanted to plagiarize, he'd have to do it blindfolded. He didn't notice, because men like Jake never think the oven's been turned off until they're chewing raw dough and wondering why it tastes like failure. Meanwhile, I quietly opened a secure cloud drive from my personal laptop. Not from the office, not from my work account, from home, with two-factor authentication, a VPN tunnel, and a secondary email routed through an LLC I'd set up 18 months earlier. The folder was labeled Dovetail IP Trust. Inside were signed documents, filing receipts, patent application timestamps, licensing notices from the Delaware Division of Corporations, all cross-referenced, time-stamped, and independently certified. Jake thought he was being handed the kingdom. What he didn't know was the crown jewels were fake, and the vault had already been emptied. That night, I made myself a grilled cheese and poured a glass of wine. Not to celebrate yet, but to mark the beginning of the countdown. Because if Jake was going to stand in front of the board and pretend to be the architect of Helix, then he better learn to present blueprints he actually owned. The invite came through a department-wide Slack ping like it was just another standing meeting. Project Helix Demo Prep, Strategy Alignment for Board Preview. Attendance, Jake, Priya, Anil, Tim. Wednesday 10 a.m. No mention of me. No CC, no heads up. I stared at it for a second and clicked the tiny drop-down arrow next to the meeting title. Yep, I was officially excluded. It wasn't even subtle. They'd formed an entire prep committee for the Helix demo, a product I had built from napkin sketch to prototype, and I wasn't even a ghost in the room. Not consulted, not looped in, not even copied for awareness. I was functionally erased like a coffee ring on a conference table after a Clorox wipe. Jake, of course, didn't mention any of this when he passed me in the hallway that morning with his signature finger gun salute and a big day coming up. Like we were teammates prepping for prom instead of a federal tech pitch. I didn't respond. Just gave him a dead smile and kept walking, mentally rerouting every plan I had for the week. Because if they were planning to launch Helix without me, then it was time to let them try. By lunchtime, the next domino fell, HR. A woman named Steph from People Ops messaged me with a cheerful, "Hey Megan, can we chat quickly today? Just want to align on your new role transition timeline." Smiling face with smiling eyes, she had that double emoji energy you only develop after years of turning layoffs into growth journeys. I scheduled the call, bracing myself for more euphemisms. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. Steph thanked me profusely for being so gracious about the leadership realignment, told me how excited everyone was about my new focus zone, and asked if I could go ahead and sign the digital form, removing me officially from Project Helix's personnel chain. Just for documentation, she said, nothing changes in your pay or benefits, of course. Your terms stay fully intact. And that's when the first crack of lightning lit up the inside of my skull. She said it so casually, she didn't even hear it. Your terms stay fully intact. I asked for the document, downloaded it, scanned it twice, then once more just to be safe. It did exactly what she said. It removed my name from the active Helix roster. But it left everything else alone: my original offer letter, compensation package, benefits, and most importantly, contractual carve-outs. I signed without hesitation. Then I waited until after 9 p.m. Once the house was quiet, the office was dark, and no one could ping me with fake urgency about synergizing back-end schemas, which, by the way, is a phrase Jake actually used once, unironically. I opened my personal laptop again and logged into the Delaware Secretary of State's corporate portal. Two-step authentication, verified address, registered agent login, and there it was, Dovetail IP Trust, LLC, still active, still clean. No liens, no cross-ownership. Filed under a different name than my SignerGen profile, but traceable if you knew what to look for, which no one at SignerGen ever did, because no one thought I was capable of that kind of foresight, of legal planning, of protecting what I'd built before the wolves could smell blood. I clicked Download Certificate of Formation, then the IP licensing addendum, then the carve-out clause notarized on a sleepy Thursday afternoon by a bored UPS store employee who had no idea she was stamping the trigger of a corporate war. I bundled the files, zipped the folder, and backed them up in 3 places, one of them on a thumb drive labeled recipes in my kitchen drawer. Then I whispered to no one, "Let's begin." And for the first time in weeks, I slept like a loaded weapon. Boardroom demo was scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. sharp. Big energy, sleeves rolled, coffee cups steaming like missiles in launch sequence. I wasn't there, of course. My calendar was blessedly blank, but I'd heard through the grapevine that they'd even ordered fresh bagels. You know, the kind of high-level catering reserved for IPOs or funerals. Fitting, really. At 10:02, Jake was in front of the projector like a Vegas magician, about to saw a woman in half. Polished deck, polished smile, button-down shirt just tight enough to scream, "I go to Barry's boot camp and lie about it on LinkedIn." I imagined him with his usual lines. Innovation is the heartbeat of logistics, or whatever synthetic garbage he learned from an airport business book. According to Priya, who messaged me later like a woman recovering from trauma, he'd barely clicked to the second slide when it happened. The screen froze, then flickered. Then a pop-up appeared like a ghost from the basement. Access revoked, licensing agreement invalid. Contact system administrator. Jake blinked at it, thought it was a fluke, hit refresh. Same message, he tried again. Same, the board chair leaned in with a squint. Is this part of the presentation? Jake laughed nervously. No, just a little hiccup, except it wasn't a hiccup. It was a damn aneurysm. He motioned for Anil, the junior dev from IT, to come help. Anil plugged in, typed something furiously, and went pale. System logs showed that the Helix core, its API, its adaptive modules, its authentication keys had all gone dark. Not deleted, not corrupted. Just gone. Locked out like a tenant evicted by their own landlord. And then, the real kicker, Anil scrolled down to the error trace and read aloud, as quiet as a funeral cough. Licensing key invalidated per Clause 3, A of Independent Agreement DVT 102. Nobody in that room knew what DVT 102 was, but I did. DVT, dovetail, the IP trust. That was the clause that pulled the plug. Jake started sweating so visibly that someone apparently slid him a napkin. The CTO leaned forward and asked, "Where's Megan?" Which, let's be clear, is hilarious. It spent the last month pretending I didn't exist, and now I was suddenly the patron saint of uptime. Meanwhile, I was at home. It was a sunny Thursday. I had jazz playing in the background and a pothos plant on life support that I was finally making time to water. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, once, twice, then 20 times in a row. I didn't check it. I moved to the next plant, a peace lily named Barbara that I'd nursed back from fungal hell. She was thriving. Unlike Jake, back at HQ, tech leads scrambled. Priya told me later it was like watching someone defuse a bomb with mittens. Nobody could access the deployment keys. The backups were encrypted. The credentials were tied to the original license holder, me, and the license had expired at midnight the night before. No one had thought to check. No one had renewed. They didn't even know it was separate. Because Jake, dear, delusional Jake, had wiped me off the contributor registry thinking that would erase the paperwork too. I poured myself a glass of cucumber water and stepped out onto the balcony. The air smelled clean, sharp. I took one sip and muttered, "I told you not to skip the documentation." The calls kept coming. First Priya, then Anil, then the CTO, then a number I didn't recognize, boardroom line, probably, all unanswered. Inside the war room, someone finally asked the right question. Who owns the platform? And in that moment, Jake's legacy transformed, right there in front of the board, from rising star to crater. Helix didn't just glitch, it collapsed, and I hadn't touched a single thing. By 11:17 a.m., the entire building smelled like panic and overpriced toner. Legal was summoned, not emailed, summoned, like priests to a tech exorcism. 3 attorneys and the general counsel herself. Kendra Strauss, a woman who once made an intern cry for stapling a compliance addendum upside down, walked into the boardroom with their tablets already glowing. It took them less than 20 minutes to find it. A dormant LLC registered in Delaware, Dovetail IP Trust, tied to Megan Halston, tied to Project Helix's core architecture, tied to, most critically, the original source code. Within that trust, a fully executed licensing agreement. Timestamped, certified, reviewed and signed off by Kendra Strauss herself 13 months ago, complete with attached carve-out memo and a little-known clause from Signer Gen's standardized employment agreement. Clause 11C. Employees may retain ownership of external inventions developed independently and without the use of Signer Gen resources, provided said inventions are disclosed to legal and certified under IP carve-out procedures. I had done all of that, quietly, formally, on company paper. I'd even attached it to an all-staff memo Kendra had issued about encouraging entrepreneurial innovation. Irony tastes like aluminum and smug. Kendra set the licensing paperwork down on the table and looked at the CTO like she was grading him. She followed protocol, she said, voice even. You didn't. The CTO, who once told me I should smile more during presentations, was now red-faced and stammering about team breakdowns and documentation gaps, which is rich coming from a man who thought a checksum was a networking app. Jake tried to throw sand in the gears, of course. He claimed sabotage, said I had misled him, said I hadn't shared full access when onboarding. But the IT audit logs were damning. Every credential revocation had come from his account. Time-stamped, IP logged, with a memo field that read, "She's out. No access needed." No access, huh? At 12:05 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another missed call, number 26, then 27. By the time I put down my lunch plate, cold sesame noodles, a fork, and exactly one olive I hadn't realized made it into the mix, I had 48 missed calls. Then 73, then 112, board members, legal, the CTO, one call from Jake, hilariously labeled urgent, please pick up. I stared at the screen, then turned the volume down and slid the phone into the drawer next to my cinnamon gum and that one Sharpie I won't let anyone borrow. I wasn't being dramatic, I was being clear. By 2:00 p.m., word had leaked across departments that Project Helix was effectively frozen. Engineering couldn't access the back end. Sales had to cancel a product preview call with an enterprise client. Marketing deleted the launch tweet mid-schedule. And the board, oh, they were livid, not just because they'd been embarrassed. Not just because the Golden Boy CEO's protégé had faceplanted in a room full of stakeholders, but because it all could have been prevented by reading. Reading the contracts, reading the filings, reading the clause I had told HR, in writing, I was activating, one Kendra herself had signed with a dry blue pen and no eye contact. No one read it, because no one expected me to be the one with foresight. No one expects the woman who writes code in silence and eats lunch in her car to be the one who laid down a paper trail so tight it could choke a C-suite. And now? Now they were trying to reverse engineer ownership from scraps. They had the sizzle. I had the pan, so while they circled each other in panic, I brewed tea, Earl Grey, splash of honey. My apartment was clean. My plants were alive. My silence was loud. And their failure was entirely, gloriously their own. Jake's meltdown began as a slow leak, a hairline crack in his polished facade, but by the end of the day, it was a full structural collapse, and he didn't even realize he was holding the sledgehammer. The first signs came when someone leaked the Slack threads, not the ones where he was begging for backup, but the older ones, the ones with time stamps, screenshots, context, messages from me to Jake. Please don't revoke my repo credentials until the handover is fully reviewed by legal. We still need to walk through the API key renewal process before you remove me from the deployment list. Reminder, the licensing agreement has an auto expiry unless reauthorized. His replies, thumbs up emojis, a gif of Steve Jobs, one-liners like got it, rockstar, were pivoting fast. He hadn't read a single word, but he had revoked my access the same day. When IT finished their internal audit, the report was so damning they password protected it twice. Every credential revocation traced back to Jake's account. The deletion of admin rights, the override of DevOps keys, his own login, his own device, his own unforced errors. It didn't matter how many times he screamed sabotage. The logs were against him. And when the board read those Slack threads, one of the directors reportedly muttered he torched his own parachute. Legal stopped returning his calls that afternoon. HR reclassified him from strategic asset to pending review, and by 5 p.m., his name had been removed from the internal company wiki's leadership page. Just poof, like a ghost of bad judgment. But that wasn't the best part, not even close. The best part came in the form of an email from HR. Subject line, confidential, retention opportunity time sensitive. It was addressed to me. They wanted to talk. Not about apologies, of course, they never go that far, but about resolving this unfortunate disruption with grace. The offer, a salary bump, stock options, retroactive credit for Helix's roadmap, and a custom title they'd cooked up just for me, Chief Innovation Partner. I laughed so hard I had to put down my tea. Partner. Like I hadn't just watched them partner with a PowerPoint fraud who almost nuked their product launch with hubris and hair gel. The offer came with strings, of course. Stay on, fix the system, help Jake transition out, don't speak publicly, don't leak anything else, don't let anyone find out that they never owned what I built. I responded within 10 minutes. Thank you for the generous offer. Unfortunately, I'm not available to accept it at this time. I wish the company continued success in navigating its current challenges. Warm regards, Megan Halston. No threats, no ultimatums, just a scalpel where they expected a hammer. I didn't want their money. I didn't want their fabricated titles. And I sure as hell didn't want to play babysitter for a CEO's broken golden boy. What I wanted was control, and I already had it. That was the real kicker for them. The part they couldn't understand. They thought they could buy my silence with benefits and a badge. But I'd already learned the truth. Once you own the code, the license, and the legal trail, you don't need to own the seat at the table. You are the table. So while Jake's world crumbled and the board fumbled for damage control, I opened a fresh browser tab and checked the status of the 3 NDAs I'd received that week, from companies that actually understood vision. Then I lit a candle, opened my windows, and let the air in, clean, detached, quietly victorious. The subject line on the email was short but heavy, board session. Attendance required M. Halston. For the first time in 8 months, they wanted me in the room, not as a ghost, not as a footnote, but as a name on the agenda. The emergency session was called for 4 p.m. Friday, prime slot for corporate bloodletting, scheduled just late enough to pretend it was casual and just early enough to keep the lawyers on speed dial. The meeting would be in the executive conference room, 10th floor, glass walls, and cold air vents that made it feel like the inside of a well-funded morgue. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not out of respect, just strategy. People notice when you're already seated. It shifts the power dynamic. I wore a charcoal suit, flats, no jewelry. Leather folder tucked under my arm. Hair tied back. Calm. Inside the room, 9 board members, the interim CTO, a few legal reps, and one empty seat where Jake used to sit. His nameplate had been quietly removed like an unwanted smell someone Febrezed out of existence. No one stood, but they all looked up when I entered. I nodded politely, made no small talk, and placed the leather folder on the table in front of me. Then I opened it. Inside, 3 clean documents. First, the Certificate of Formation for Dovetail IP Trust, LLC. Second, the notarized licensing agreement between Dovetail and Signer Gen, with signature timestamps and renewal terms. And third, the original carve-out clause from my employment contract. Clause 11, C, highlighted, footnoted, and stamped with the General Counsel's approval from over a year ago. I slid the stack to the center of the table. Let them sit with it. You never owned the core engine, I said. I licensed it to Signer Gen under time-limited terms. Silence. Real silence. Not awkward, not tense, just void. The board chair, a man named Gerard who had previously described me as logistically gifted but not quite strategic, picked up the licensing agreement like it was radioactive. He skimmed the first page, jaw tightening at each line. Do we still have access? He asked. I folded my hands. Only if I say yes. Someone at the far end of the table made a noise like a choked laugh or maybe a breath they forgot to hold. Kendra Strauss, the general counsel, didn't look at me. She didn't have to. She was staring at her own initials on the approval signature line. Gerard cleared his throat. The product is incomplete without the core engine. That's correct, I said. And your licensing terms expired Wednesday night, midnight. Had 18 months to file a renewal. And Jake, his voice trailed off like he couldn't even finish the sentence without tasting blood. He revoked my credentials, ignored my warnings, and deleted access to the admin tools tied to the license, I said. So yes, the terms expired, exactly as written. They sat with that. No one reached for their coffee. No one tapped their pen. No one looked at their phones. Then came the real question. Gerard leaned forward, voice low, like he was trying not to wake a sleeping bomb. Megan, what do you want? That's when I smiled, not smugly, not with malice, just fully. The kind of smile you wear when every brick someone threw at you turned into your foundation. I want what I earned, I said, and I want it on my terms. No threats, no dramatics. Just the truth out loud in a room that had spent months pretending I didn't exist. They had tried to erase me, but now, with the fate of their flagship product gasping for air in a licensing coffin I had built with foresight and restraint, they understood something simple and absolute. You can't own what you refuse to value. And you sure as hell can't lead what you never bothered to read. So they listened. And I waited, because this time I wouldn't be handed crumbs. I was the bakery. The CEO waited until the board cleared out and the glass doors clicked shut. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there at the head of the table like a man who still thought he had cards to play. Like I hadn't already seen the whole deck and burned it on my way in. He straightened his cuffs, sat down across from me, then leaned forward with that measured, firm tone all fragile executives learn from leadership webinars and white-collar sociopaths. Megan, he said, calm as a hostage negotiator, let's not make this adversarial. We're all on the same team here. I didn't flinch. You haven't considered me part of the team in over a year. He gave me a thin smile. Let's not dwell on the past. This isn't personal. We just need to bring Helix home. Internally, back under the Signer Gen umbrella. You're a key part of that vision. I reached into my folder and slid the single sheet across the table. 1 page, 3 logos, 3 offers, each from an investor group with real capital and a very public interest in next-gen logistics tech. All 3 had reviewed the IP structure. All 3 knew Dovetail owned the core. And all 3 had offered me independent acquisition deals, non-exclusive, founder-controlled, no dilution. The CEO read halfway through the first letter before his jaw stopped moving. You're shopping it? He finally whispered. No, I said, they came to me. I just listened. His face shifted, something between disbelief and nausea. If this gets out, it won't, I said. Not unless you want it to. He sat back, cold sweat blooming at his temples. The veneer was cracking now, and beneath it wasn't leadership, it was fear. The kind of fear that only shows up when a man realizes the woman he underestimated built her empire in the blind spot of his ambition. He tried to spin it one last time. You'd really walk away from Signer Gen after everything we've built. We didn't build anything, I said. I did, you branded it, and that was it. By Monday, the board held a quiet leadership transition. No press release, no fanfare. Just a notice that the CEO would be stepping down to explore new opportunities. He cleared his office that night. No one said goodbye. Jake's departure came shortly after, via a company-wide email laced with words like grateful and growth journey, and exactly zero acknowledgement of the crater he left behind. Rumor was he tried to sue for wrongful dismissal. It didn't go well. Signer Gen returned to me that weak tail between their legs with a fresh offer. This time, the tone was different. No more leverage games, no more condescension wrapped in synergy speak. Just raw need. They wanted Helix. The real Helix. So I gave them terms. Triple the original royalty. Full IP ownership retained by Dovetail. Licensing duration capped at 3 years with renewals at my discretion. Integration limited to non-exclusive application. Any resale or spin-off involving Helix required my written consent. In other words, they could borrow it, but they'd never hold the keys again. They agreed in under 48 hours. I didn't ask for title. I didn't return to the org chart. I licensed the engine from my living room via DocuSign while my cat slept on the contract draft. And when the ink dried, I didn't toast to victory. I opened my laptop, checked the deployment logs, watched the Helix core spin back to life under my authorization. Nothing dramatic, no fanfare. Just control, silent, precise, complete. The kind of power you don't shout about. The kind of power that answers simply, no, you don't get to own me. The elevator chimed as it reached the 22nd floor. Steel doors slid open to a lobby of soft white walls, honey oak floors, and a quiet hum of possibility. No plaques cluttered the entry. Just one brushed metal, crisp serif lettering. Helix Continuum Group founder, M. Halston. I stepped out, heels clicking once, then silencing on the runner as I crossed into the space that was finally mine. Glass-walled conference rooms lined the corridor. Sleek workstations gleamed under warm light, and a slow-brewing coffee machine filled the air with a scent not of rush, but of readiness. This wasn't a rented WeWork corner or a borrowed cube in someone else's dream. This was the future Helix deserved, clean, controlled, and owned outright. I passed a junior analyst setting up a screen in the far war room. She smiled, unsure of who I was. I just nodded once and kept walking. She'd figure it out soon enough. At my new office, quiet, minimal, facing the skyline, I set my bag down and powered on the machine. It booted instantly, no company logo splash screen, no tracking bloatware, no one watching. Just a clean terminal and a blinking cursor waiting for command. Then the ping came, an email. From board admin at Synergencom subject. Future opportunities collaboration potential body. Dear Miss Halston, board remains hopeful that we may explore collaborative pathways between Synergen and Helix Continuum Group. Please let us know if you're open to discussion. With appreciation for your leadership and innovation, I didn't read the rest. No apology, no admission, just corporate diplomacy in a silk tie, hoping I might forget the months they spent trying to erase me. I hovered over reply, paused, then clicked archive. No response, no closure, just silence. Because that's what power really is, not in the noise of revenge or the spectacle of payback, but in the choice not to engage at all. I turned back to the window. Downtown shimmered beneath me like a grid of second chances, but I wasn't looking down, I was looking out. Ahead, past. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Investor strategy call 3 p.m. confidential onboarding deck, and I smiled, not the smile you fake in team photos, but the one that says you knew they'd underestimate you, that they'd call you emotional, too technical, too quiet, not visionary enough. But here's the thing about vision, it isn't loud. It doesn't wear a name tag, it doesn't need a mic or a title, it just files first, while they're still picking fonts. Vision, you said? I filed it before you could even see it. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.